Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra,
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people.
associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked.
and sometimes what didn't,
You will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts.
And inspire you to do even greater things.
Before we jump into today's conversation, a special thanks to PM Power Consulting for encouraging and supporting this show right from the start. With over 1,000 person-years of collective experience, PM Power has helped many organizations, teams, and individuals chart out their own journeys of excellence and make progress. Thank you, PM Power. Now, let's move to today's episode. In this episode, I'm in conversation with Prasad Chodavarapu, the co-founder and managing director at Aganita.ai. In this conversation, Prasad, a tech veteran turned bio-pharma enthusiast, discusses his unique career trajectory from software development to founding a startup in the life sciences space. Prasad shares his journey starting from his early days in tech during the nascent stages of the internet in the mid-90s, working in startups, and his transition to a large enterprise consulting role. He also dives into the challenges and learnings from shifting into the biopharma industry, the impact of AI in the space, the complexities of scientific data, and the nuances of interdisciplinary collaboration. Prasad also offers valuable career advice for newcomers and those experiencing mid-career crisis, emphasizing the importance of combining disciplines and lifelong learning. He wraps up the episode with personal insights on how he maintains a balance in his life through music and family support. Listen on. Hi, Prasad. Welcome to the Software People Stories.
Thank you, Shiv.
I've always been fascinated by the kind of work that you had been doing when we were working together. And later on, this complete shift into biopharma, which is a space, I hope to learn at least something on the contours of what it is and all that. But as we normally do, if you can start with your story, your origin story, how you got associated with IT and the career trajectory, and then we can take it from there.
Definitely, Shiv. Thank you for the opportunity. So it's been a very fulfilling journey. I would say from 1994 onwards, just when the first internet browser was making its appearance, NCSA Mosaic, back in University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I was a student there from 94 to 96. So that was my first brush with software and programming. So of course the internet era took us quite a distance, and my career in programming and technology took off along with that. Had a very fulfilling one. Started off in a startup called Severa Systems, which was a startup with some of the ex-Bell Lab folks back in New Jersey. Was very fortunate to have the right kind of team there. For anyone who's starting for the first time in their careers, it's good to have good teachers, good mentors around. I was fortunate to have that. And then of course it was a startup, which meant you had the ability to contribute in many ways, and that helped me. That also took me to understanding of business computing over time, and had the opportunity to lead a very large, actually grow and lead a very large team subsequently at HCL Technologies. After a subsequent startup I was part of was acquired. And that journey involved applying technology towards business computing, essentially digitalization of business. So a lot around business process engineering, integrating systems with service-oriented architecture, data analytics. So we put together a portfolio of services and solutions that took us effectively from scratch to almost $1 billion of revenue before I came out in 2016, wanted to start on my own. So the internet scale journey also had a period. Post 2007, we saw the advent of smartphones and social media. And while internet allowed globalization and globalization really gave a lot of opportunity to a lot of people like all of us to make good careers and contribute. The smartphone and social media era also brought out a very different angle to technology. If you think about it, internet came in a unipolar world. So this was post 89, post the collapse of the Soviet Union. But in the last few years, what we have seen is technology has also become quite a tool in the hands of multiple players, and not necessarily always for the good. And social media, the name should mean that it brings us together, but hasn't necessarily brought us together, right? In a lot of ways, it has actually exacerbated divisions. So in 2016, when I came out of HCL and wanted to start on my own with a few co-founders, one of the questions was, what should we be doing with technology? And clearly AI was on the horizon. But we also wanted to make sure the application area inspired us. And life sciences did. Life sciences is definitely not an area for the weak-hearted, in the sense that it's very difficult to make monetization happen in a sustainable way in the life sciences space. But we felt that science was becoming more and more data-driven. So back from the human genome sequencing that started in 2000, there's been a significant revolution. Biology became significantly data-driven, and hence we felt as technology folks we can really make a good contribution to the world with our work. So that's how we got into we started Aganita, and then that's why our focus really on biotech now. So that's my journey in a very short way.
Yeah, wonderful. I think there is a lot to cover. So initially, when you mentioned that the NCSA Mosaic and internet coming up, we also used to talk about this, programming in the small and programming in the large and all that. Was there any shift in thinking that was needed, to design for, say, the browser, or design for the net, where you don't know, who will use, how they will use, or how many would use?
Oh yeah. Of course, my own journey from a product engineering startup back in Savera to doing a lot of enterprise consulting and business computing in HCL, it showed me that contrast. But even otherwise, think about it. Had we let IE, Internet Explorer, I don't know if you remember that phrase, had we let IE sustain its advantage, we possibly would have been still in Stone Ages. So there was a time when Netscape disappeared, IE took over, and there was quite a feast for all the viruses. Essentially, the security holes in the legacy Windows era, the client-server architectures of the Windows era were quite a liability, and took a while for everyone to realize that, okay, we need a 3-tier architecture, we need to plug all these security holes. So yes, internet definitely, I would say I would credit two players, especially Google and Amazon. Google really got us away from the throes of the Internet Explorer, and Amazon showed the power of scale. I still remember their CTO making presentations early on around service-oriented architecture and how that has really helped them scale. This is even before cloud computing was offered by them.
Okay. Yeah. So from let's say a person who is trying to design a solution or look at a problem to solve, which is at much larger scale, what have been some learnings, or what are some things that you kind of learned the hard way?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wouldn't say learn the hard way. I enjoyed learning each of these lessons. But they were good lessons. Of course, the technology changes took quite a bit of effort.
Yeah.
Right? So when I was at Savera back in 1998, we were building what's called as an interconnect billing system. that allowed large telephone carriers to settle, commercial transactions between them. So, for example, today when we dial from Airtel, let's say that call ends up in Geo network. Should Airtel be paying Geo for terminating that call, and vice versa? So there was a time back in '98 when carriers used to settle for carrying each other's calls. And essentially, what we had to do was we had to meter every single call that was being carried across all the networks, and that required a really large database. So there used to be these conferences called VLDB. So our CEO was one of the original members of the VLDB conferences. Yeah. So, but VLDB conferences were still the classical, OLTP OLAP architectures still. And when internet took off, and when Google needed to organize the world's information, clearly they were not enough, right? And that's when the horizontal scaling, the map reduce techniques all came about, and that led to, for example, move away from some of the traditional data warehousing architectures like Teradata to what we see today, right? So definitely that is one switch that happened. So the switch to MapReduce, Hadoop, and horizontally scalable cloud systems. But the other switch that happened, which is possibly not well known, is the one that I've seen over the last few years. Historically, computing technologies, algorithms, data structures, all of them have been designed for businesses mostly. So I talked about a billing system in the context of telecom. You can think of financial ledgers, you can think of HR records, you can think of supply chain, logistics. So these are business problems. And we've all designed and we're all very familiar with the kind of technologies that have come about to meet the needs of these kind of businesses. But when it came to science poses an extremely different set of technology challenges that technology was traditionally not designed for. So, for example, a lot of knowledge in science is in unstructured form.
Okay.
So we know a lot about all the plant species on the planet, right? We know a lot about all the animal species on the planet. Lots of observational science recorded in PhD thesis, in research publications, in diagrams. Similarly, if you think of geoscience, a lot of information recorded in maps and diagrams. Similarly, if you think of biology or medical, a lot of information sitting in doctor's notes, right? So a lot of data in unstructured form. But also, if you think about molecular biology has attributes which are very different once again. For example, high dimensional spaces. So each of our cells has 20,000. So our DNA has 20,000 genes roughly, human DNA, right? And each of our cells has a full copy of our DNA. So if you really want to represent what's expressed, which genes are expressed in each cell, you need a 20,000 dimensional vector. So you think of it almost like a CRM system where each customer has 20,000 attributes. Yeah. And then you have, that's number one. One is high dimensionality. The other one is multiscalar. So life is organized in the form of atoms at a physics and chemistry level. Then there are molecules. Then there are cells. Cells form tissues. Tissues form organs. Organs form organisms. Organisms form communities, ecosystems. So there are phenomena that need to be modeled, and there is knowledge at each of these levels. So it's very hierarchical, right? So hierarchical data, even knowledge graphs struggle to capture these things because knowledge graphs also have very, very limited capabilities to capture some of these relationships. So as you can see, the kind of and it's truly big data. What always fascinated me is there was an article back in 2014 or sometime like that. Someone compared the amount of data that astronomy was generating on every day to amount of data that social media was generating and internet was generating to the amount of data that exists in one cell, right? And it was very clear that within one cell was the amount of data that could rival the amount of data astronomy was generating. And
Wow.
if you really put together all of the data across biological species, at least the inefficient way we were organizing that data, representing that data, it surpassed the amount of data that the whole of universe could give us.
Yeah.
So we are talking about extremely different scales. So yeah, so talking about handling data at various scales and the challenges that come with handling different types of data, clearly, computing had to deal with these challenges, and now with in the last few years we've seen a lot of work happening on scientific computing and a lot of energy going towards handling these kind of data structures that science poses. So I've been fortunate to see those changes as well.
So just stepping back, what I was trying to understand is that considering our limited cognitive bandwidth or what we can do, the moment you are in a domain where there is so much of data, where do you start?
Very good point. In fact, science has this challenge, right? I mean, and luckily, I've seen good practices dealing with that. So I'll tell you a few things that really struck me as an outsider coming into science. First and foremost, every scientific publication and every science lecture starts with an explanation of basics. The audience may have Nobel laureates, and yet the person who is speaking will not assume that the audience understands the definitions of basic terms, and they will start with the definitions of basic terms. It will immediately ramp up in complexity immediately on the second slide, but they will not presuppose that you know their specialty, because there are just too many specialties and each one is very deep and it's an ocean in itself, right? That's one. And the second one I've seen also is this culture of fantastically documenting. In fact, I've always been stuck with this idea. If we want to see the best of humanity, I think the moment we realize how scientists have organized all of our knowledge systematically over centuries and decades and kept it and preserved it and nurtured it and made it available, that shows the best of humanity. What they have done is essentially, systematically collect that data, not just collect the data, organize it along FAIR principles, which is make it easily accessible, findable for everyone. Open science is flourishing as a result. So definitely, scientists have taken the initiative to inform everyone else around the assets that they have built and have facilitated the use of those assets. And we continue to do that. And technology is helping along the way, right? So definitely every piece of data that's thrown out by a segment of science isn't necessarily easily understood by others. And that's where technology can really help, especially agentic AI, we may talk about it later, is really helping in being the translator, being the glue between disciplines.
Since you talked about knowledge systems and how science has been trying to organize things and make it also available, there's also been a lot of talk about the Indian knowledge system. Have any views on that?
I mean, I don't have any views on that, but I've seen people make very good efforts towards that. I have friends who have been working very hard. One of my friends who founded an organization called the Manasu Foundation has digitized every single printed page that has been published in Telugu over the last hundreds of years. Similarly, I have another friend who runs andhrabharati.com, who has been very carefully digitizing a lot of these palm leaves, transcriptions on palm leaves. And of course, there are bigger national level, international level initiatives around Digital Library of India and things like that, right? Yes, I've seen that. Similarly, in the medicinal systems, both the Indian medicinal system, the Chinese traditional medicinal system now has a lot of patronage and has a lot of resources at their disposal to capture those things. It's a continuous effort, of course. Even within the broader global arena, for example, there is a clear understanding that we are losing a lot of traditional knowledge around plant species, for example. There was a shift around the year 2000. Now, in one way, a good shift. So since 2000, because of the ability to sequence at a molecular level what's happening within our cells, we started learning about life forms by learning about ourselves.
Mhm.
Until the year 2000, most of the work happened by studying other species,
Okay.
right? But since 2000, it has shifted dramatically.
Mm.
And so in a way, a lot of the expertise around other species, for example ornithologists, people who used to study bird species, so a lot of those disciplines may or may not be getting the same level of attention anymore. So yes, that's a challenge, and I think it's always a few individuals, few entities that keep the flame alive, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. No, the reason I was asking that was the Western approach has been to codify, to document, to analyze, to compare, all that. Whereas in India, we've been relying more on, say, a person to person kind of a transmission. And losses in transmission, or even when we document information about plant species, or let's say all the palm leaves, the context may be lost at times.
yes.
So, how do we kind of identify those gaps, at least knowing that these are yet to be explained or yet to be connected? Uh, the computing, we'll probably come to that because that's something that I had. So, the next the curiosity question that I had was from being in a startup to getting into enterprise consulting and those kinds of solutions. Uh, what was the startup bug that made you, or no, why did you want to start up? And then, of course, you did mention why this
Yeah,
topic.
yeah. My first couple of jobs were in startups. I was not the founder or the co-founder for those startups. I was one of the early employees in both of
Okay.
those cases. But luckily, I had deep relationships with the co-founders there or founders there, and they gave me the best of opportunity to grow. And it was, I'll tell you a very interesting story. So I had a job offer when I came out in 1998 to get into tech. I had two job offers.
Mm.
One was Savera, where I joined.
Okay.
And just before I got the offer from Savera, I also had an offer from one of the really large oil data analytics
Okay.
majors. Yeah, and it was extremely good offer. They in fact promised to help me with additional education and things like that. Very incentivizing in a way. And then I went to interview with Savera, and it was a very small place, hardly a few individuals. The place was extremely disorganized at that time because they were in the process of moving from
Yeah.
one office to another. For whatever reason, I still picked Savera.
Okay.
I still can't figure out why I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
looking back, that was the best decision of my life
Okay.
because it helped me learn a lot in a very, very short time,
Mm.
in direct tutelage
Mhm.
with the masters. That's what I would say. Um, so I don't know why I picked one, but
Mm.
it was, and then when of course our second startup, the one I was part of, got acquired by HCL, that was quite a shift because until then we were part of a 100 people, 200 people organization, and suddenly we were in the middle of this an organization that had lakhs of people as employees. But luckily, and I would really credit it to of course Vineet and team who ran HCL Technologies back in the
Mhm.
days we were part of HCL. It was truly different.
Mm.
So definitely, I never felt constrained.
Okay.
I always felt very enabled,
Mhm.
uh, even in that large organization.
Mm.
And there were very few hurdles. So we were able to collaborate across lines of business, across business units, across functions, and it really helped.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you move from there to a startup, then the buck stops with you, right? As a founder or co-founder. Was there any mental preparation that was needed for that? Or was it just like, let's jump in and then figure out?
Oh, luckily there was no fear. I'll tell you why there was no fear because some of my co-founders were actually the founders of the first two startups I was part of.
Okay.
And we were all part of HCL together again. So we were together for 20 plus years, working together,
Okay.
shoulder to shoulder.
Yes.
So it was, and they were serial entrepreneurs. While I was not an entrepreneur to start with, until then, I knew I was in good company, and I also had the opportunity to see the scale go up over a period of time. So journey in HCL was over 10 plus years, right? So there were times when we were very small. We were around 200 people when we started HCL. Yeah. So yeah, there was no fear of being in a small organization, nor was there fear of lack of resources. By the time we started in 2017, 2018, the world was a very different place. Cloud computing was in place. So a small startup could afford to hire or rent the same cloud capacity that a large organization could, right? So yeah, so it was a very different place. And I'm really happy in 2025. In India, for example, I don't think any young person thinks twice before thinking of a startup.
Yes, sir.
Luckily.
Yeah, yeah. So along with that, it is also about getting into a completely new domain. So how was that?
That was gradual.
Uh-huh.
So it's not as if on day one we said, hey, this is what we're going to specialize in and we're going to
Okay.
confine ourselves to that. I think we let both the tech as well as the domain competencies evolve over a period of time. In a way, COVID really helped because the flood of scientific literature and information around COVID meant that the world was a lot more open. Open science became even more open, and the world was flooded, and the world was hungry or rather thirsty for solutions to dealing with that fire hose from which everyone was drinking. So we started hiring from the best of institutions. We also had the fortune of colleagues joining us from the best of labs abroad. So people who are coming after their postdoctoral work or research work abroad were also coming to join us. So I would say until about 2021, 22, we were still very small, and a lot of the learning was self-learning. Whereas post that, because we had quite a good scientific team come join us, we were no longer really only a tech company. We were a tech plus science company on equal footing on both fronts. So now today we have a very strong computational biology, computational chemistry team alongside the AI and the tech team.
In terms of how you approach the problem on what you call the software life cycle or the development life cycle, is there a difference in working in, let's say, the industry or anything else that you were doing earlier to working in the biopharma or the life sciences area?
Yeah, huge differences. Absolutely. And for good reasons, enterprise technologies got streamlined over 20, 30 years, right? So since the advent of relational databases, advent of ERP systems, CRM systems, and then of course the SOA era, then the big data era, all of them helped us streamline enterprise architectures, technology architectures in enterprises extremely well. Science did not have that benefit. Science tends to be extremely fragmented. The way society funds science means that knowledge is automatically fragmented, data is automatically fragmented. And a lot of code bases are just carried as is, as black boxes over time. For example, Python 2, which took 10 years to transition to Python 3 because of the way they changed, they broke the backward compatibility. A lot of code bases even today, some of the older code bases in Python 2 continue to exist and continue to get used inside Docker containers because no one has the incentive to rewrite them from scratch. The other challenge with rewriting any piece of code in science is how do you validate it? I mean, in business, of course, you would say, okay, I have test cases and I would do it. But in science, once a piece of work gets published, there's very little incentive for anyone else to go back and redo that piece of code.
Okay.
Yeah, so that piece of code lives on. So there'll be a lot of C code, there'll be a lot of Fortran code, there'll be a lot of R code, Python 2 code that just lives on. And of course, because the momentum has really taken off in the last few years, the latest code dominates in terms of size, whatever is a legacy code. But legacy code is very much there.
terms of the practices of, we talk about technical debt, we talk about, say, more refactorable architectures and stuff like that. Do they apply in life sciences also?
Um, as I said, there are no stacks in life sciences
Okay.
or any science.
Mhm.
There are big companies, of course, who try to build those stacks, but
Mm.
they also tend to be specialized. In
Mm.
fact, I would say what we've been able to do over the last 5 to 6 years is really build that stack for ourselves. We
Okay.
still don't offer it to our customers as a
Okay.
stack. We
Uh-huh.
offer it through our solutions.
Mm.
As I was saying, unlike in business, because of the incentives, the way incentives are set up in science, the stacks don't necessarily get organized in nice refactorable fashion.
Okay.
Rather, thankfully, because of the container era, and also um, because containers essentially meant that we really didn't have to touch the internals of code, right?
Mhm.
So as long as it works, it works. And cloud computing. But there's one thing, science has some unique needs. I'll bring out a couple of them. So for example, you take a workflow,
Mm.
right? A business workflow can also be long running. A
Mm.
scientific workflow can also be long running. So not much change there. It's long running. But the challenge is, unlike a business workflow, the cost of each run in a scientific workflow is extremely high.
Okay.
You may be running it on a very large supercomputing cluster
Mm.
with a lot of computing resources. And you may have queued up that job for weeks before you got access to that cluster. And once you run it, if it fails in the middle, you cannot afford to restart it from scratch.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are several best practices in scientific pipelining that haven't made it to business workflows, by the way.
Okay.
So there are best practices there
Yeah.
that the business, technology teams don't get to know as much and incorporate in there, and vice versa. The kind
Mm.
of cleanliness that has crept into business code bases hasn't come into scientific code bases because the ownership is fragmented.
Uh, so when, okay, pardon my question, it's probably a very silly question. When Agnita creates some solution, is it only the algorithms, or is there also something more in terms of the output that is created to test the algorithms?
And that's a great question, Shiv, because there is a fundamental characteristic of our work that may not be visible to technology teams who are not working in science. So our work happens in deep collaboration with scientists.
Okay.
While we have scientific teams on our side, we are not a full CRO. In other words, we don't own our own wet labs. Wet labs are labs where you, for example, culture cells or
Mm.
do chemical reactions. We don't have any of that. We don't have any of the actual lab setup
Okay.
where we do the experiments. So when we build an AI model that predicts, for example, what would be a good catalyst for a reaction,
Mm.
or what would be a good mutation to do in an enzyme to make a reaction happen faster, a biocatalytic reaction, or if we are helping screen different drug candidates, whether they are small molecules or antibodies or RNA therapeutics. In all these cases, the predictions that we make have to be tested in the lab.
Mm.
And that responsibility is taken care of by another entity. Usually it's a customer in their own labs, but customers may also have outsourced that work
Mm.
further to other CROs.
Okay.
So it's a multi-entity collaboration,
Mm.
and usually the cycles are long.
Okay.
So while your modeling and prediction cycles may be weeks and months,
Mhm.
the actual wet lab, because of the logistics involved, can usually take months and quarters.
Okay.
So usually we do multi-round optimization. So we do round tripping. So we start with data that came from wet lab or that came from public sources, meaning someone else has published
Mm.
the data. You build a model, you make some predictions, you now go back to the lab, try out those designs in the lab. You will get the next round of data that comes back and informs our next version of the model. So it's really that kind of a collaboration that happens. I'm trying to recall the question, the exact question you had, but this is the nature of our work. This is how we do our work.
Yeah. Yeah. The question essentially was, how do you test this or how do you validate what you create?
So what we're selling is not simply an algorithm.
Okay.
Rather, because we also have scientists as part of our team, what we're trying to do is help solve a problem for the customer. And the problem can be, okay, I'm immunizing mice against a particular target, and I'm able to harvest some antibodies that the mice have grown. I don't know which of these is the right candidate from various perspectives. Can you help me screen them?
Okay.
Yeah. So they may have sequenced and shared with us the sequences. And now we apply our algorithms to do quite a few things. Look at, for example, whether or not a particular antibody will be sticky, whether it will stick to other copies of itself and not be purifiable, not be isolatable. Yeah. So that's an AI model. So for that, we have data coming from the lab saying these are the sequences for which we've suffered aggregation. These are the sequences where aggregation was lesser, right? Where we were able to purify through a column, HPLC column. So we get the data, we do our modeling, share our findings, and a lot of that modeling is also informed deeply by some of the experiences that the wet lab scientists would have gathered over time. So a lot of the time we don't even keep our AI modeling secret. Rather, we are collaborating actively, understanding the features that might be helpful in predicting the phenomena that needs to be predicted or generating the entities that need to be generated. Very, very, very different workplace.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So there is no concept of these trials and certification and all that, like what we normally see in the drug space, right?
Yeah, so let me explain that part. That's a good question you're asking me. So if you think of the value chain, there is the extreme left end wherein you're trying to do basic research to understand why a disease occurs in the first place. What is the mechanism of the disease? Then you're trying to understand, okay, what would be good targets to design drugs for, given the mechanism of the disease. Then you would do design of the actual drug itself. Then you would put that drug through various qualification steps, and usually in simple dishes, in simple reactions, simple lab devices. And then you go for what is called as in vivo testing, and that starts with animal models today. So, for example, mice models, primate models. So until you get there, it's fairly unregulated, right? Regulation only comes in once you're getting into actual organisms. Like for example, if you're doing mice studies, that's when ethics coming right away. And of course, human trials are highly regulated. So we play a lot more on early R&D, right?
Okay.
We started to work in the context of trials, but there again, we are helping our customers design trials. So, for example, what would be a good control arm? What would distinguish between the population that's likely to respond to a drug and the population that's unlikely to respond to a drug, so that your trial has higher chances of success. Yeah. So a lot of our work doesn't fall in the regulated zone, and hence it's much easier for us. We are not in the regulated zone as much.
A related thing is also, with the AI approach, as we also talk about it being explainable, and if you have the traceability, can that kind of reduce the time required for all these trials?
Yes, that's a hope, definitely.
Okay.
Right? Now, trials are a lot more complex construct than just a science construct. What I mean by that is, talking to a head of a vice president who was responsible for trials globally for a very large organization, one of the largest organizations. And their challenge was the following. They said every year we spend north of $1 billion on trials. 40% of our trial sites have zero recruitment.
Okay.
Right? Now, what does it mean to start a site? It means training, first of all, locating the right principal investigator, getting them onboarded with the protocol, training all of the staff, healthcare professionals in that site to follow the protocol, setting up data exchange systems, all of that. And that costs a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah.
And subsequent to that, you get 0 patients at that site. And this is not 10%, this is 40% of your sites.
Okay.
Yeah. So there is a bigger problem, and that problem can only be solved with lot better capturing of population level data. Now, some of the Western countries, for example, UK has a fantastic initiative because it's also NHS driven. UK has fantastic initiative around data collection. US now has a lot of initiatives. A lot of phase 1, phase 2 trials for right now, for example, are happening in Australia and New Zealand.
Okay.
The moment you go out of the traditional geographies where a lot of these things happen, paucity of data sets in, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to do a trial in Asia, for example, you may not know what will be the right trial site. So making trials happen faster, cheaper, making trials more efficient has a lot more factors than just science.
Okay.
Yeah. For example, making trials happen in India also involves understanding the Indian landscape where there isn't enough literacy, both in the administration as well as in the patient community around what a trial is. And hence there are fears, and some well-placed fears and some unfounded fears around what a trial is. So I am not sure science and computing is going to solve those problems.
Because the related thing is also about, I mean, even in, let's say, all these autonomous cars and all that, when it is an algorithm that is actually doing things, now who is responsible or who owns the IP?
Forget IP. I am extremely scared of the ill effects of technology. Right. As I said, the founding of Agnita when we started as was really soul searching, saying, hey, where should we really be applying all of this technology? There's a very nice MIT technology review cover, I think back in 2012, maybe Buzz Aldrin was on the cover. And he said, hey, I thought you were going to take me to Mars, but you gave me Facebook. Okay. So technology can be put to good use. Technology can also be put to trivial use. Technology can be put to harm or to make harm happen. And from that perspective, AI is everywhere now. We've seen the India-Pakistan war, for example, create a scenario only for a few days, but that scenario was nightmarish, isn't it? We didn't really want a war. Of course, we weren't asking for a war. We unfortunately got dragged into one. But think of all the, for example, the Ukraine war has shown how drones are now making autonomous decisions so that they are not detected by the air surveillance systems and making decisions on where to bomb. That's not definitely a good use of technology. So again, the unipolar world in which internet ballooned or blossomed helped internet be a lot more positive for humanity. I am not so sure about technologies now because there is competition going on. Even if you think about ChatGPT versus the race between OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, and other entities like that which are making large language models. Yes, they are trying to be as rigorous as possible in their red teaming and testing the models they're putting out. But think of it, right? Google Mail was in beta for how many years? Right? In fact, one of my co-founders was pointing out to me yesterday, Google Finance is still in beta.
Okay.
But not Gemini. Why? Because Gemini has to contend with the competition from ChatGPT. Right? So the amount of rigor, the amount of testing that's happening before you launch products and let everyone use them is being also governed by how much competition is there. Everyone is afraid of another entity getting forward. For example, at a global security level, every nation is worried about other nations, being able to leverage technology better than them. And similarly, companies are afraid of other competitors being able to get in the market before them. So this is driving technology at a pace that we cannot control safely. And that does pose a lot of risk to humanity. I don't have a clear answer as to how to mitigate those risks. Everyone is also trying to be responsible to the extent they can be. But I think the competition intensity is driving us towards decisions that may be bad in hindsight.
And when it comes to AI, people have very strong, predictions or their own perspectives. But one thing which I said, just like the transformer, what the transformer model did to LLMs, and then there are these, foundational models, people creating that, and others using it. Uh, is AlphaFold likely to have that kind of an impact?
Oh, AlphaFold has revolutionized biology. There's no question about it. What used to take a PhD now happens in an afternoon. Um, yeah. So the pace at which we're able to do science is dramatically changed. And AlphaFold is only one popularly known example, thanks to the Nobel Prize, of course. But foundation models are everywhere in science now and continuing to mature. And in fact, what we're also seeing, yesterday there was a very nice announcement around C2S, cell to sentence, wherein it was a hybrid model. So it was a English model, Gemma, that then got trained on expression of genes within cells. So it's a hybrid model that understands gene expression in cells as well as natural language. And now you are doing science with that. So yes, large language models are transforming science. Transformer is of course everywhere. And of course there are advances in AI that are also taking us beyond transformers, of course. So there are significant wins to be had for humanity from all of these innovations. And work is happening at maddening pace, and we ourselves are reaping the fruits of all of that work. But of course, we are very concerned about the other side that we are not part of, in the harmful side.
So this is also probably a good segue. I'd like to ask our guests some career tips, for two segments of people. Let's say those who are considering or those who are about to enter or starting their career. If they were to look at life sciences and life science computing related things, what would be your guidance for them? And the second category is the people who are probably going through what we may call as a mid-career crisis. Whatever I'm doing, is it really making a difference? I want to do something, and when they have reached a certain stability economically and otherwise, if they were to consider life sciences, first of all, is that possible? Does it require a lot of entry barrier in terms of domain knowledge or something else? Yeah, would like to.
Oh, my favorite topics.
Okay,
Thank you for
okay,
asking this
cool.
question. Just because I've always worked with freshers predominantly.
Uh-huh.
We continue to hire predominantly freshers on the tech
Okay.
front, and hence I enjoy working with them. Definitely, it's a very difficult time for anyone who's trying to enter computer science now, and I think I've had this clarity for the last 3-4 years at least that computer science will cease to be a single discipline. In other words, it doesn't make sense anymore for a young person right now to go and do 4 years of bachelor's only in computer science. I think that person will need to add one more discipline. So it can be any discipline of their choice, but it should be a dual degree. Is my suggestion, because computer science is something that helps in every domain. And thanks to AI, you don't really have to put in the same amount of effort to write your code, to design your code. It's not perfect, of course. You still need to babysit AI generators of code, right? But it will improve. And more importantly, you will also have a much more, you'll have much more fruitful career if you are expert in two disciplines as opposed to one. So that would be my suggestion to anyone who's trying to start now. Now, for people like me who are older, have had a fruitful career, and now are trying to diversify to whet their own interests, right? A mid-career crisis, for example, Vineet Nair, who is ex-CEO of HCL and someone who you and me worked closely with, he wrote a very nice blog post a couple of days ago around mid-career crisis, a nice set of cartoons explaining it. And what he brought out in there was very nice, which is mid-career crisis actually means you're hungry to do more. It's a positive thing. It's not a negative thing, right? It's about saying, I need to really make a lot more solid impact to the world at large. That's the hunger that someone is showing when they say they're going through a midlife crisis. And I do encourage them to consider all possibilities. In fact, my pet argument with all of my friends is assume that your lifespan is 120 years.
Hmm.
It's quite possible that it is.
Yeah.
And assume that your faculties will be functional and good place
Ah,
all the way, right? It's not just longevity, but
mhm.
also quality of living,
Yeah.
right? Assume that ears will still work, your eyes will still
Mhm.
work, that you will not be frail, that you will not, your muscles will not be frail. Yeah.
Hmm.
So if you really have 120 years, and if you've dedicated the first 20 years of your life preparing for a career of 30, 40 years after that,
Hmm.
wouldn't you want to prepare the next 20 years for the career after that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is actually more time for someone who is, let's say, 50, 60. There's an equal amount of time left on this planet for them
Mhm.
as much as they spent so far. So when I was 10 years old, life seemed infinite, right? So you can still work in that mindset now. And if you
Hmm.
take that approach, and especially with AI, what is happening is it's very easy to get into another discipline today
Mhm.
than it was even 1 year ago,
Hmm.
because you can learn your way.
Yeah.
And in historically, and I think Malcolm Gladwell talks about it in some of the books, and when he was in one of our customer meets, I remember doing a lecture where he talked about how a lot of innovation happened from people who come from one field into another,
Yeah.
because every field has its innovators and ideas, and it solidifies around a set of ideas.
Mhm.
But when an outsider comes in, they look at it with fresh eyes, and
Hmm.
when they see with fresh eyes, they're open to questioning things that insiders don't question as much, and hence
Yeah.
innovation happens naturally.
Yeah.
So I would absolutely encourage anyone who is wanting to shift fields and has good financial security already built up through their
Mhm.
existing career. Yeah, absolutely experiment. There's nothing to be lost. In fact, you will only gain. And as I said, this will be the foundation for the next 30, 40 years of your career.
Because from working in the traditional, say, the software world, or even developing applications which are more deterministic, or we think it is very predictable, to something that is more probabilistic and something that may take you anywhere. Uh, any career shift, uh, training, or you said 10 years, does it take that long, 20 years to prepare for a 30-year career? That's a very nice thing. Yeah. I never looked at it that way. Yeah. Uh, yeah. Uh, so one, last question that I have is, do you have any personal techniques that keeps you anchored? I'm sure there are going to be a lot of uncertainties. You don't know. You're working on something new, particularly in an R&D kind of environment. Is there anything that you would like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I am fortunate to be around my parents. They're aged, but they're more active than me, so that's good.
Okay.
So definitely, family helps you. Being around my parents has been very helpful. Separately, I would say I'm also a learner of Carnatic music. I'm an eternal student, let's say it that way, of music as well. I never wanted to be a professional, never aspired to become a professional singer, but I've been learning singing, Carnatic music singing for the last 20, 30 years, and
Okay.
thankfully with the same teacher.
Oh, nice.
And hence, that really gives me a break. It gives me a huge, opportunity to completely take my mind off
Hmm.
from my regular work. I'm very obsessed about my work because I enjoy it.
Yeah.
But still, it's not healthy to be obsessed about only one thing,
One thing.
right? You would want
Right.
balance
Yeah. Yeah.
in life, and definitely music has helped me a lot. And in fact, of course, we all know that music has tremendous benefits for health.
Hmm.
In fact, there was a paper just 2 days ago
Mhm.
that talked about how, for example, in gene therapies, or not gene therapies necessarily, any therapy that needed to cross the blood-brain barrier,
Mhm.
if you were designing a delivery vehicle that would cross it, for whatever reason, someone experimented this on mice cells with music on and music off,
Okay.
and the absorption was higher with music on.
Oh.
and they actually measured and they said, okay, this kind of music is a lot better for the absorption. So there is still a lot of musicology. Now, a lot of musicology was not done necessarily in a very scientific way so far. I know in IIIT Hyderabad, some of the researchers who do work on understanding which parts of the brain get stimulated by what kind of music, and there's quite a bit of work there. But going further than that, music as therapy, right, is also a very interesting topic, and there are people who are starting to study that. So coming back to the original question, music has helped me a lot, take my mind off things.
Wonderful. We'll probably take it up as a separate conversation, because one of the things that I've been having as a question for a long time is the way music is taught, at least in the Indian system or Carnatic system. Even very young kids are able to pick up the discipline, play solo or play in a group, all that happens. Are there good practices? Now, like you said, now, coming from a different discipline, you may get the breakthrough ideas. Are there any practices that we can use to train developers? Faster, or the kind of mistakes that people do, the time it takes for people to get disciplined, right?
Yes. I'll tell you a single line that I've been telling my team members who are fresh out of college, who join, and invariably every single one of them comes to me after 2 weeks and says, how am I doing at my work? There is anxiousness to know and get the reinforcement that they're doing well. And the example I give is, let's say I'm learning music and I'm learning basic notes, how to play basic notes. If I go to my teacher and say, how am I doing? Usually my teacher would say, can you go attend to these concerts? Right? They would refer me. My teacher would refer me to a bunch of concerts and say, I would like you to go listen to those concerts. Why? For multiple reasons, but one reason is when you're in a real concert, you realize, oh, that's what singing is. Yeah, and you understand that there is a journey. And it's a long journey, and no longer anxious to go through the journey. You realize, okay, it's going to take some time before I'm going to get that level. Right? Same way in programming or any other field, if you see masters at work, you will realize that's the level you can be at. And you will no longer be anxious of reaching that overnight. You would take your time getting there.
Yeah. On that note, thanks a lot, Prasad, for sharing your perspectives, your experience, and I still feel I'm probably a little too late to start on this, but this domain seems to be very, very challenging and interesting. Thank you.
Never too late, Shiv. Hope to see you around.
Let me see. Because right now, in fact, after more than a couple of decades of not really programming, now with all these tools, and I was able to build a complete client-server application which is running on my machine. I still haven't deployed it, and now exploring some new ideas, architectures, and then using AI as more as a thought partner to evolve the design. Yeah, I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Welcome back.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.